That's what I was thinking.
Just waiting. Where's everyone?
Yeah, that'd be pretty funny. Wouldn't it?
Switch the rooms like that on people.
Anyways, we can begin after I post the link.
Okay, less people, then we probably get this thing done faster.
Perfect.
Should move quickly.
All right. Move fast and break things. Gotta hate
I'm
that.
really not breaking.
Okay. Oh, I just realized this is recording me.
What if we don't want something done, but he doesn't say that?
Okay. Oh, here you go, Kurt.
We're trying to get him to fix the website at 3 a.m.
It's up now.
Which is weird. Yeah, he pushed it, and then he told me to fix it. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Are we gonna push it tonight?
It's already up.
I know, but are we gonna push it tonight?
Push it implies that it's already up. But how do I fix something? No, I'm not sure.
Because I asked him, do you want advertising tomorrow? He's like, yes.
Cool. Should we start? All right. So this week, week 4, we're going to talk about implementing the API. So last week, we talked about server client architecture. We went back to the basics, kind of like week 1 material. We talked about RESTful design, and we gave the example of Instagram, how Instagram model their API, how they talk about comments, pictures, and accessing those resources. We talked about the HTTP protocol that's used for requests and responses in a RESTful API. We talked about the different kind of verbs we have, like get, post, put, delete, and how we'd use them in our case for building our event API. We described what an application programming interface is, covered it, what it provides people, an interface or a descriptive way of how to access data from a secondary data source. And we talked about model view controller I don't think we talked about it enough or in a clear manner, so we'll go back to that. So here we see the model view controller design, the MVC design pattern. So if you imagine when you go onto a website like Facebook, you're a user that's seeing a view. That's from the V in model view controller. You interact with the view, you click a button. The view then needs to tell the controller, how do I react? It calls an action. And then the controller can go to the data model, whether it's, say you write on Facebook, you're sending your friend a message. You hit the send button. So that's your user interaction, you click in the send button. The view is then gonna tell the controller, maybe the message controller, I need to send this message. The controller is okay. Now, Facebook might have a model, which is messages that are being sent. So we're gonna manipulate the model. We're gonna add a new message in there. When it's done, the model will tell the controller, hey, the message is being saved. And the controller can then update the view, and then you will see it. So that's the whole process when you click something and there's an action that occurs. We're saving it to the database. But the MVC design also lets us segment parts of our application that, have you guys taken any software engineering classes, software design, modularity? So we want to keep related actions, related code together in one spot. And by having our controller manage a model, we can say, hey, let's have an event controller that will work with the event model. we keep those things together close because most of the time, anytime you try to manipulate the event model, we'll use the event controller. And for views, any view can interact with the controller. It's not like a one-to-one mapping, but there are actions that the controller has that the view will call. Does that make sense? Cool. To recap, we talked about our API endpoints. We see the HTTP verbs we're going to be doing. What's the function of each of these endpoints? And one thing we should do, I think, to move forward and make it very clear that we're using the MVC design is clean up our code base. Because right now we've gotten to a basic point where we have API routes, but it's not following this design pattern. So one thing we'll notice that we don't have any HTML views right now. For users to interact with our application, it's purely through an API. So we can think of our view as what are the different routes or actions that our user can interact with. And then for the controller, we're going to make an event controller because we've already developed the model. Do you guys have the model? I think we did that like 2 weeks ago, right before we left. We might have been rushing, but. So the first thing is let's create a controllers folder right at the root of our project. Ocean, where's the? That's not cool. Mm-hmm. Guessing you guys can't see that. Okay, so right now we're in the root of our folder. Can you guys see that text, or does it need to be larger? Okay. And what I'm doing right now is calling a command, which is make directory. Oh, wait, never mind. Ocean, where's the old one, last week's? Yeah, I did. This last week's stuff. Ah. Sorry, guys. So we're in our root folder, the project. You guys should all have this, right? We're going to use the make directory command, and we're going to make a folder called controllers. Now, let's open up our code editor. And we'll open you guys. You. Oh, Jesus Christ. Can you guys see that thing's click? No.
Turn off voice.
Hmm? Put that back on. Anyways, so we're in the controllers folder. We're going to make a new file, and we're going to call it eventcontroller.js. Oh, did you guys don't have the slides, do you? What I'll do is I'll put it on right now. You guys can get it. You guys on Windows or? Okay, you know what? Maybe I have to follow along this time. We're having a problem exporting it to PDF. We can go slow. So in our events controller, which is in the controllers directory, we want this to handle all the functionality or all the actions that a user can make for our event model. So we described an API. We said we want to have a post to / events. This is all in week 2 slides as well. So you guys should have that for week 2. Jesus. In your controller, event controller.js file, we want to add the following lines. Exports dot create event equals function request response close brackets. Do you guys remember that? Those request handlers, we've seen them a couple times. So what we're doing now is we've also seen exports in a couple of files. And if we remember, exports just means when you require that file, these things are available. So right now we're exporting functions. That means when we require this file, event controller, we can call these functions as well. So let's put these things in our file. Exports. Create event, get event. Let's say get events. Event. So let me know when you guys have this part and then we can move forward. I think just because it's 3 of us, it'll be easy to work this way. So basically what we've done is we've created a file, a controller basically, and it has all the functionality. It has all the request handlers that handle all the functionality we want for our event model right now. So we've kept it all in one file, kept things close to each other. Now, in a sense, it's modular. If we ever need to call anything, any action on the event model, we can just go to the event controller for that. Are you guys good for this? Cool. So what we can do right now is, previously we've said these are our endpoints, right? We've defined these endpoints. So now let's remind ourselves that we have these functions here. Let's keep in our memory what these functions are doing and what their endpoints would be. So here, create an event. We want it to be a post to localhost 3000 / events, right? And here we want to get all events. So this one's going to be create event, all events. And for this one, we'd have get, localhost 3000. What is that? /. events. Here we want to get a single event. We want that to be the endpoint. So do you guys have that down? Cool. So now from the model view controller, we've created the controller. The next thing we said is the view. How can a user interact with the controller? There needs to be something to bind the two together. And for this, we're going to create a file that's going to have our API routes, because the API routes, like we said, defines an interface for users to interact with data. And now what we've done is we have data representing data models, and we have a controller that takes in all the actions or handles all the actions for that data model. So let's bind an interface now. Let's create one so that users can call it and get to the right action they're looking for. So in the root of our folder, we're going to create a new file. And let's just call that routes.js. Perfect. Sorry about that. And what we're going to do is, let's make this up. The first line, express, require express. We're going to be using the express router to handle the requests when they come in. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to require express. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take that express module and take the router out of it because we want a router. We're going to instantialize it. Now we said that this router or this routes file is going to handle the request coming in. So now we need to start defining our endpoints. So like you can see in the slides, we have router.post, and let's just do a post to /events. Is that what we said? Controller, event controller, /events, events. Cool. So let's take a peep while we do this at our actual API endpoints, because that's what we're defining at this point. So we're having a post to events. We're having a get request to events. We have another get. We have a put, and we have a delete. So let's just put those in. Does this make sense now? So we have a router that we've created these routes, and we say, hey, when we get a post to /events, let's do something. So now we know that, hey, when a request comes into here, when we go /events, we want to pass it to a function, a request handler. If we remember in our controllers, event controller.js, we just defined all these event handlers because they all have the request, response, and next objects we were looking for. Oh, 1 second. So what we can do now here is let's load our event controller. Let's just say var event cprl equals require. And let's require that new file we just made. So it's controllers/event control.js. So what we want to do now, or whenever you guys have this, yeah, we have our event controller that we exported all these actions, these functions that respond to actions we want to happen on our data model. If you remember, event controller here, we said exports.createEvent, exports.getEvents, getEvent, updateEvent, deleteEvent, the actions, and they're exported. So now when we require this, we can say, hey, for a create event, we want to do .create event, just like that. We map the action to the endpoint, the view to the controller. And don't forget there's a comma after the parameter, the endpoint. Do you guys have any questions regarding this? All right. So far, so good. Cool. So what we've done is we have our controller, which has actions for our data model. We've now created a binding. We said, anytime we have this route being called /events with the post HTTP verb, let's send that request to the events controller and the create event action. So now our controller and our views are done. The next part is the model. How is our controller going to interact with our model right from the database? Before we forget one thing, let's just do module.exports equals router. so that we can require this as well. Okay. So do all of you have this event model present in your folder models / or / models event.js? Yep. Okay, cool. So let's pop back into our event controller. So now what we've done so far is anytime a request comes, it's going to end up over here. We need to handle that. We need to respond or reply to these requests. So we've said that a controller, in this case, we're binding it to one model, right? The event model. So let's require that model so we can start using it. So let's just go var event model equals require. And we'll go back one folder. We'll go models. Wow. So what we've done now is by requiring it, we can use this model wherever we need it, which is going to be most of the actions in here, which is actually going to be every action in here, sorry. So now that we have our event model available in this controller, let's start using it. So when you create an event, we see that the user or whatever front end, they're going to make a post request to localhost 3000 / events. Now, the difference between, so when you guys go to anything in your web browser, you put in the bar and you would enter, your browser makes a GET request asking for data back from the server. One thing with the post request that makes it different than a GET is when you post to a server, you can post with data in the body. Your request now has a part of the packet, which includes a body where you can put data in. So when someone's posting to localhost 3000 / events, we want to extract data from the body of that request so we can use that to build our model. Does that make sense? So the way that Express allows you to access the body of a request is this way. So say we wanted to get the name, right? So we'll say, you know what, let's just start creating the model. Sorry. New event equals new, and we're going to say new event model. This is the instantiator for the event model we just created. And if we go back to our events, the model, we see we have a name, we have a date, and we have a description. So what we'll do is, let's just say new event dot name. This is how we're going to set the name property on this new event. And we're going to say it's request dot body dot name. That's how we're able to access the body of the request. So what we've done so far is we've initialized a new event model. We've created an object. So if you guys have done programming before, you know the new keyword initializes an object from a blueprint. We've defined this blueprint over here, which says an event schema will have a name, a date, a description. So we've used that blueprint and we've said, hey, let's create a new event model, which we set into a variable called new event. Then accessing the request body. So here we've grabbed the name property from the request body. We've saved it to the new event model we just created. So the object, we're setting its name, setting its date, setting its description. Does that make sense? Cool. But now what we want to do is we want to save this. We want to create a new piece of data in our database. We want to create a new event. So let's just say new event, and we're going to call the save function. This is a function that Mongoose provides for MongoDB that allows you to save an object once you've set its values. So we set the values, now we want to call save. One thing we talked about last time is that JavaScript is asynchronous. Remember, requests can happen continuously, and when we're ready to respond, we will. So the save function is an asynchronous function. That means we need to give it a callback to say, hey, when you're done saving, let me know about it. So we're going to do this. Function error. And then we'll say saved event. So all we've done here is we've just created the same function like we've done everywhere else, but we've put it in between the parentheses. We put the function right as a parameter. So yeah, so we're calling the save function. We've taken this new event. Basically, have you done object-oriented programming ever? A little bit? Okay, cool, yeah. So when we say new event model, we're creating an object, right? We're instantializing an object. Here we're setting the object's name, date, description. And now we're calling a function, or what do you call it, method? A method, an object method. So we're calling the save method of the object. And parentheses, parentheses, that's how you call it. But in the method parameters, we're passing in the function. So if you remember from last week, we said we could do, this is very, you can go var save handler equals function error saved event. So just like last week, we can go like this as well. So this means we've declared a function, and then save, we pass it this and say, hey, when you're done saving, call it. So let's go back to the other way, because you'll see this around more often, especially if you're doing tutorials and whatnot at first. So, okay, now we've called the save function, and it's given us, it's going to call a function that has error and saved event. So what we'll do at first is we'll say, hey, if there's an error, let's return next error. Let's pass the error off to the next handler. because we don't know what's going on. Maybe we have error handling, so let's pass it off. Otherwise, let's go return, and we'll do response.send saved event. Now, one thing we talked about at the very first week was everything across the stack is in JavaScript or in JavaScript format. So when we save an event to the database and it returns as a saved event, it's already in this format called JSON that we've seen and talked about. So all we have to do is say response.send saved event, and it's going to come out as JSON. So let's save that. And that one's done. So for us to test this, let's just see if the saved event works. We have to go back to our app.js because there's one thing we haven't done yet. And that is app.use. So remember these old routes we had? These ones, this one that we made? Let's toss these. Let's remove them. Because now, if you notice one thing, as we're slowly cleaning up these files, why do we have 3 different routes over here? This is like the main app starting point where we configure it. We don't want to clutter it with this kind of configuration. That's what a routing file would do, right? So we're separating the concern. So let's toss these. Let's toss these. And let's require that file we made, right? We made that routes.js file. So we'll say API routes equals require So if you remember from, I think it was second week, we spent a lot of time cleaning up. We did that whole housekeeping, right? And we removed all the error handlers into its own file. So now you can think of us doing a very similar thing with the API endpoints. We put it all in one file and we load it. Okay, so are you guys good with this? Did I comment it out? Yours wasn't? Well, let's just look at it. So we have errors.js apps. Does your errors.js look like this? Yep, yours too? Okay, cool. So yeah, if you want to uncomment that, we're going to be using that for handling our errors. So you saw how when we hit the save function on Mongoose, we said if error, return next error. This is where that next error is going to happen. It's going to handle it now. And one thing you'll notice is we say app.use function request response next. We take the error and we give it a status and we pass it on to the next handler. And we say here, if app environment, which means, hey, are we in development? Are we in production? Are we out in the wild? How are we going to handle it? We talked about it, right? Do you guys remember? We don't want to give out too much information if it's in production. One thing to remember, we said at the start was Express follows these app.use in the order they're defined or the order it hits them. So one important thing is that we use our API routes first, and then we have our error handling. If it was the other way around, when you hit next, there would be no more handlers in the chain. So that's why that's the ordering, and it is important. Okay, are you guys good with this? Let's see if our server starts up. And we might as well, because we're here, delete the routes folder, because we're done with this. We're not using any of these anymore, right? So let's delete that folder. Get it out of here. Why the hell do we even have that? Delete. So do you guys have the same files? We have a controller, we have a model. I don't know why we have that. Oh, I have to download no modules. You guys have it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You're ahead of the game. And that's a good call because I probably would have forgotten.
Yes, I really like deleting my modules.
Okay, so let's, we're here. Like you said, let's grab the node modules. So remember that it's npm install. Let's make sure we have the correct modules. So we'll go to package.json. We see our dependencies that we've been building up. Good. So let's run npm install. Now the node modules folder has popped up. Please work, please work, please work.
That should work.
That should work. Cool. Okay, and now I think we started with npm or nodemon. Start.js. I think that's how we did it. Oh. Sorry. Is your server starting up? No? Cool. Nodemon crashed? How about you? Okay, I think yours is good. Yeah. No, you have an error. My routes. Okay, routes is not defined. Let's go to your file. I'll open up my app.js. Now, this is the way you learn. Okay. Try nodemon start. Mon, N-O-D-E, node. One word. N-O-D-E, start.js. Good. Okay, cool. There we go. And now, yeah, we're gonna test out our server in a second. How about yours? What kind of modules are modules / already screwed up too. Mine's a bad. Okay, so Nodemon's good. All right. So that means that our server's running, our endpoints are working. We connected to the MongoDB database. So let's try testing it. I'm gonna open up Chrome. I hate this. New. And then we'll go, do you guys remember downloading Postman in Chrome? Okay. So you can wait while you're downloading Postman. So we said that when you do a post request, so Nodemon just helps us do requests, just manage it, put a nice interface on it. Here we're saying we want to do a post to our local server, localhost 3000, at the /events endpoint. Nodemon also lets us select the body, because we said when we're doing a post request, we want to send our data through the body. And we know there's a name, there's a date, and there is a description. And so for name, let's just say the event is HackItMac, or screw it, Delta Hacks. What date? 2016. What is 0116? Cool. In the description, hackathon. So if all works, which fingers crossed, look at that. So one thing you'll notice is we sent back the response that the same method called, and we see that now we have an ID. We can uniquely identify this event.
Oh. Just 2016.
Okay, it's the formatting that you should do it this way because the date format of the database. So you didn't give it the full one. So try to match it to. There you go. Cool. So now we have an event. We have an ID for an event. Let's go create some more of the API endpoints. Let's implement the rest of them. So, oh, look at that. Post events worked. And we answered the request in 84 milliseconds. It's actually kind of interesting because at 84 milliseconds was us sending a request through our server, going to MongoLab, them giving us a response, and then us sending the response back. So that all happened in 84 milliseconds. Okay, so we're all good with that. Let's start doing this one. Let's do the get all events. Now, one thing we've seen over here is that we called new on the event model to instantialize an object, an event object that we can use. We can also call methods on just this event model to search our database. So one thing we can do, let's say here, we'll say this is for getting all the events from the database. So we'll say event model.find. And the find is very similar to save. It's either going to give us an error or it's going to give us all the events. So let's say function, error, and events. And as always, we'll say if error, return next error. Otherwise, return response.send events. Oh, sorry. How the? Oh, beautiful. Oh, I love this. Yo, Ocean,
What's up?
how do I move this?
Oh, yeah, Chris.
GG. It's all right. It's all right. I got it. I got it.
Back things.
Ah, there we go. That's what I wanted to do. All right, are you guys good?
When you do the if command for the error for both of them,
Yep.
is there any difference between just writing next ERR or next error?
Oh, sorry. Good catch. So I'm writing error just so it's more verbose for you guys, but normally you're gonna see, if you guys are cool with it, we can do it this way, but it's, most places will just use ERR. If error, then go for it. So we can use that. That's why I've been typing it the whole time and having to like switch back. Same way how it's like REQ for request, RES for response. So one thing you'll notice with even other JavaScript asynchronous function calls is that if there's going to be an error coming back from the async call, it's going to be the first parameter, the first argument in the function. So you wouldn't do function saved event comma error. It's always the error first. It's like a convention almost. All right, so let's test out this new endpoint we made. We've said we can call get on localhost 3000/events. So let's do that. Oh, look, our event showed up. And that took 44.183 milliseconds. How do you, oh, okay. So over here, let's type the URL. Well, you didn't make the event yet, did you? Yeah, okay, so that's fine. So
I have a test.
yeah, so it's the same endpoint, right? So /events. And to create an event, if you remember this, you want to call it post. Okay, that's not. Let's see what's going on. Let's look at So one thing we have to do that we didn't, or I guess we missed when exporting our events, our error handler. Oh, maybe I did it. You don't have that. Do you want to check your error handler and see if you're doing response.send in yours? first parameter. Send. All we're doing is sending.
I had render, so should I change?
Yeah, to send. So remember the views folder we had?
Yeah.
And we the view engine, we deleted them all.
Right.
So when we call response.render, there's nothing in the pipeline. There's no engine in the pipeline to say how am I going to render it.
Right. Okay.
So it just crashes. So now we're telling response.send, and they'll send it as just just raw data. Nothing rendered. Okay. That's not
It's taking that long.
yeah. Okay. 12 milliseconds.
That's not bad.
Okay, perfect. So get/events 404 not found. Local 2000/events get. So let's look at your here. You said require routes, go to API routes. Go to routes file, /events. Get. Yeah. Okay. So now we're gonna run this again.
One more time. One more time.
It's weird it takes so long. Are your requests happening pretty fast?
Yep.
Windows?
It could be anything.
Okay, cool.
53 milliseconds, 31 milliseconds.
How the hell did it take 1900 milliseconds? That's interesting. Oh,
No, not that one. So it's way
63 milliseconds. That's odd. Okay, let's try your create an event post. Do you remember what we did to create an event? I'll show it to you again. So that's how you create an event. Okay. And the next handler we want to do is to get a single event. We've said to get a single event, we will be doing a get request to /events / the event ID. So basically we want to query the database with an event ID, right? So how are we going to get this? As we can see, we're passing in the event ID in the URL parameter, right? We're saying it's right in the URL. We're not putting it in the body. So let's just say event ID equals request params, and we'll say event ID. Now, almost exactly like the other query, we want to call the model, event model, and we want to say find. But one thing cool with Mongoose is it has a helper function. So we can call find by ID. And what find by ID allows us to do is pass it the event ID we're looking for. And then we can put in our function error event. So now we give it, the first parameter is the ID we're looking for. The second is the callback. How are we going to handle this? So if you check out the Mongoose documentation, it has a bunch of different helpers that make it super easy for querying for single objects and getting the data you need. Would your posting work?
Yeah, it takes a long time.
Want to try restarting your server, or if you do want to throw some other stuff? It's maybe the internet connection is bad and it has to route from your computer to, are you using like Mac Secure? Because we're bottlenecked by the speed of Mongo library. We're getting our data from there. Okay. Sorry, not clear. Try posting though and see if well, yep, so connect post. Now in the body, remember we want to set the name, description, and the date, right? We want to pass those as parameters. Okay, so what we want to do is, remember how we said we have key value pairs? So we want to use the key to be name, and we want the value to be delta hat too. So that way when it comes in our parameters, we say our request.body. Remember we did request.body? The key, we can go request.body.name, that's the key, and the value would be what you pass in here. So go with that. All right, do you want to try getting your point grid? So / maybe one of those IDs. That's the ID, right? That's the ID we use to identify the value. So we're going to take off the dot dot. The dot dot is only used here to identify that it's a parameter. It's not it's events. It's a resource. We want to say that this is an identifier resource. We use dot dot as a notation. It's a parameter, it's a variable. Oh, the code? Sorry, yeah, code. The dot dot. Yeah. So just remove the code. Yeah. And now let's do that. Let's do that. Should get delta. So one thing we can do, let's put it back here. So early here, sorry, our one line up, right after the represent function. Let's just say console.log. Parentheses. Function call, function call, and then init. And then here it's for a string, and we can say got request. Let's say got request. We want to make sure it's coming through, right? And then over here, in this handler, we'll say got response. The same thing, we're going to log it and say we got response. So that way we can see how long it takes. Not, so if you remember, when you return, that means it's not going to go to anything after. Yeah, so maybe we'll do that as the first thing that happens before we check for errors. It's just a console.log, got response. Because then we know, hey, if we got a response, the next thing it's going to do is send us something back. Oh, you got it. Cool. Create an event. Now you can get all events should send it back.
But what? I think it was just internet that time.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Cool.
it gave me the entire thing, the ID, the description, name.
Yeah, perfect. Right. And only for one event.
Yeah.
Great. That's what we want, right? We tell it the event ID. So do you want to try that with yours? Do you want to do it again with the new endpoint we made? So we're going to do. So here we're saying we want to get a single event. So that's what we're going to be doing. So every time, so let's do that in Postman. So what I was just telling him is that when we have, it's called a colon, we have colon event underscore ID. The colon is just syntax to say this is a variable. So there's going to be something in place over here. So in this case, we're just going to put the ID of one of the events you had. So remember, how do you get all the events? So I get, yeah, on that. And I'll copy one of the IDs and add that one. No, just that. The quotation was helpful, right? And now, enter. So it just took long for you that one time?
No.
Yeah.
Yours
I'm pretty sure
also-
it was just internet.
For me, it always takes long. For me, it just always takes a while.
You can figure this out. As long as it does work though, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So now let's do the update event. So this one's a little bit different. As you can see, it has the exact same endpoint as getting a single event, but now we're using the post. Or actually, no, we shouldn't. Sorry, my bad. But to localhost. Because we just made that mistake, let's just double check our routes is also using put. Okay, yeah, routes are using put. Good. So in the put, we're going to be updating our model, right? That's what puts are used for, that verb. Put is very similar to post. You can send it data in the body of the request. So in this case, we'll also be using the body to get these new values for the model. And we're going to be using the event ID given from the parameters. So let's just start it. Let's say var event ID equals request params event ID. And now we want to find this event, right? We want to find an event and then we want to update it. It's a two-step process. So we'll do event model. Yeah. It must just be like the internet being shoddy. I don't know. Oh, true. Okay, so let's do this. So going to get event ID from request parameters. Then we are find event with matching event ID. As always, if error, turn next error. Now this is the difference. Here we want to modify. So let's update the event attributes using passed in values from request body. Does that make sense why we would do this? First, we're going to find the event we want to update. Let's get a reference to it, right? Let's say, okay, once we have that reference to an event, let's modify it the same way we did in the past. So imagine that this is now our reference to the event with the matching ID. And what we can do now is say if request.body.name, hey, did we pass in a name parameter in the post or in the put? If we did, we'll say event.name equals request.body.name. Gee. Do if dot date So now what we've done over here is we're looking at the request body. We're saying, hey, what parameters has the user given us? Because we know the user wants to update this event model with this ID. What data have they passed in that they want to change? If we find data in the body matching the parameters we know we accept, name, date, description, we will then change the event's name, date, description accordingly. So something similar, notice how we're setting these values to the values from the body. Just like we did when creating it, we now want to call the save function because we have a reference to it. So we'll call event.save. And let's do what we always do, function error, and then say saved event. Error. you want to try this endpoint. If you shot. So we actually want to change it. Let me see. Cool. So let's give it a shot. Use that one. And then now we're going to change the parameter type, or the post type, sorry. HTTP verb, right? We have get, post, put, delete.
Oh.
So now we want post. Or, yeah, you're right.
Right.
Yeah, correct. And
Parameters.
we're not going to use that one. We're going to use body parameters.
Oh.
So the parameter needs URL parameters.
And we do
Yeah,
the-
excellent. Yep, correct. It's form. And now what do you want to change it to be? You don't have to put them all, right? When you're doing post. But fuck. Oh, I'm getting confused. Yeah, you don't have to send out all the parameters. You can whatever you want to pass. That's why we're doing the check, right? We're saying if this is there, then update it. If this is there, update it. Only for the values we're looking for. So the zeros work, updating.
Okay, I don't know how to call it, so.
Okay.
I
Cool.
clicked on
You
post.
changed?
Change from the text to the hex to
Nice.
Okay.
You don't know how to call
So you want to paste the ID here,
it? And remember the one we're tossing the body.
right? Just over here. Oh,
You just have to pass it.
I like this legal activity.
So now if we go back to maybe.
I don't have one.
Am I saying it like it?
I don't want to bring more. And what is the
Cool. So now our last one we have to do is deleting an event. As we always like saying, event ID equals request.params.event ID. And now we want to access the database. So we're going to use the event model. And here's a method that Mongoose provides in the event model that allows us to find an event and delete it in one shot. It's not a two-step process. So we can say find by ID and remove. Seriously. Well, not all yet, because we're going to pass in the event ID. We have to tell it what we're looking for. And we're going to do function, error. And one thing you'll notice is we're only giving it the error for the function. We're only expecting an error back, because if they deleted the model, then you can't return anything. So let's say if error, return next error, otherwise return response dot send, and we're just gonna so let's see mine. Let's get all events. And let's try that delete. Oh. And did I delete them? Yeah, mine deleted. Oh, that's beautiful. What the hell? Okay, last one. So one thing you'll notice is we're just saying response.send and then empty. The reason we're doing that is it gives it a 200 response, and that means 200 okay. Oh, look at that, cool. Gives you a little snippet about the response. So does your delete work? So what you can do is if you just get all your events and then just run delete on all of them and make sure it's empty.
Do you have like a preview of what the final web app will look like?
No, I think we should do that before we start building. We just knew that these had to be the actions that the function will, the app will have. We can start designing it. I think next week we're going to be using Angular. So Sean will come in. Maybe. Are they Dylan? Okay, so someone will come in and we'll be doing Angular. Because now we have the endpoints, right? What we have to do is start hitting them. So we need to have some HTML code, some Angular code, which says, okay, I need to list all the events. How am I going to get it? Now we can just do a request. You can see it, and it'll give it the data it needs. But you guys have any questions regarding this? It was clear, it's just simple. It was kind of different because we went back to coding like off the screen, but well, just two of you guys, so it's not. Someone's listening in?
Yeah.
Hey there. Who's listening in?
Malin.
Hey, Malin. And everyone else.
Going.
I know it's going like on YouTube and what? Okay.
Insane.
Well, that's it for today. If you have any questions, comment below the link. I can't see it on YouTube. Damn. Just comment below there. All right, sweet.